Alright, let's start with the obvious here. I know I have people who watch from other countries, and I know Thanksgiving is an American holiday, but I don't really care about that. Mostly because I don't really care about Thanksgiving as a holiday anyway. It's easily my most hated of all the main holidays, but whatever. The point is, this gives me an excuse to be thematic and do something a little bit different than my usual videos. This is the top 10 games I'm thankful for. Now I should mention this isn't the top 10 games I think are the best, it's more a list of the top 10 games that have impacted my life in some way or another. If you're interested in this, then listen on as we go to number 10. I've got to be honest, this game made it onto the list purely because of how high quality it is. Unlike most of the other games here, I don't have some nostalgic connection to it, and it didn't change my life. When I think back on some of the best games I have ever played, this one is always in the top 3. The Last of Us. What can I say? This game is near perfection. The story, while a cliché zombie story at its core, does some interesting things with the lore and nails the character development. Joel and Ellie will likely go down in history as one of the best duos in all of gaming. The environments are extremely detailed, the presentation in terms of acting and graphics are outstanding. Most importantly of all, the gameplay is some of the best I've ever experienced, somehow creating a stealth system that balances the stealth in such a way that being spotted doesn't mean an automatic death, and yet charging through every encounter is still a deadly and dangerous predicament. Hell, I even love the multiplayer, despite being awful at it. It's a game so good that I honestly doubt Naughty Dog will ever be able to top it. Don't get me wrong, I really hope they do. I would love to see another game of this caliber. I'm just doubtful. Anyway, if you haven't played it, you need to. Moving on to number 9. While likely not the first game I ever played, it is the earliest game I remember being even remotely proficient at. And it wasn't even with the Super Nintendo version, but with the DOS port. Meganman Act. What can I say about this title that hasn't already been said by so many others? It's arguably one of the best platforming games of all time, and for me, it sits only behind Shovel Knight as my personal favorite. The music is outstanding, the controls are incredibly responsive, the level design is near perfection, but none of those reasons are why it's on the list. It's on the list because if I hadn't played this game as a child, who knows if I would have become a gamer at all. I mean, let's be honest here, I likely would have been introduced to video games at some point, but still. I actually have a full review of this one on my blog, and though other people have done the game much more justice than I did in said review, I still don't feel the need to go into any greater detail here. If for some godforsaken reason you haven't played it and you're a fan of platformers, get to work finding yourself a copy. Just do it, okay? Okay. Number 8. Metal Gear. Or more specifically, Metal Gear Solid. I didn't play this game until long after its original release, once it was released for PSN, but once I did finally play it, it blew my mind. This futuristic stealth game took a story genre and medium that I usually hate, that being action films, and turned it into something I couldn't pry myself away from. And let's be clear, the Metal Gear series is as much a film as it is a game, and I still think it is glorious. The voice acting was stellar for the time, the presentation, which, let's face it, now looks pretty awful, was also a marvel back when the game launched. If I'm being completely honest, Metal Gear Solid 1 isn't even my favorite game in the franchise. My vote there goes, strangely enough, to Peace Walker. But like most people, I can't deny that it all started with this masterpiece of a title. Playing through the entire Metal Gear series in chronological order provides a complete experience unlike playing anything else in the industry. And while the story gets rather convoluted and, well, let's just say plain f***ed up at times, the journey is absolutely amazing. In the end, how could I not put the game that introduced me to not only my second favorite franchise, but one of my favorite genres on this list? Number 7. This was a tough entry as I was torn between this game and Tekken 3, because both are rather nostalgic fighters that I love playing. When it came down to it, Soulcalibur III just appealed to me more for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I love the weapon-based combat. I also much prefer the button layout and combat system to Soulcalibur to that of the more frantic and combo-based 2D fighters that flood the market. Your actions make sense. One button for horizontal slashes, one button for vertical slashes, a dedicated block button. It just feels smooth and natural. Adding on to that was Soulcalibur 3's many game modes. It had challenges you could take on that set certain restrictions on the battles, or the stages had gimmicks which really forced you to become a better player. The game even had a pseudo RTS and RPG mode called Chronicles of the Sword, which let me create my own army of characters, level them up, and fight through an entire campaign, which, yeah, with retrospect, wasn't a very well designed mode, but I loved it when I was younger. But most important of all was the character creation. I used to spend hours at a time customizing characters for use in the game and as a basis for my own fantasy stories I was working on. Yeah, I was a nerdy teenager. It also became tradition to break out the game whenever friends came up for, allowing everyone to make their own characters that we could battle each other with. That's what it comes down to, really. Soulcalibur 3. Come for the weapon-based fighting, stay for the character customization. This is nostalgia all the way. Number 6. Dragon Age Origins. This should definitely not be a surprise to anyone, as I gush about this game constantly. Hell, I even have a failed Let's Play attempt uploaded on this very channel, which I may or may not get back to eventually. I feel it's far more important for me to keep the reviews going right now, so that's on the back burner. Anyway, well, not my first experience with Western RPGs, we have Might and Magic 5 to thank for that. Dragon Age Origins was the first time the genre really clicked with me. After attempting to play Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion and hating it when it was released for PlayStation 3, don't worry, my feelings on the game have changed since, I promise, I almost swore off the genre completely. But after the game being highly recommended to me by my father, I begrudgingly gave the game a try, and it blew me away. While the story itself is rather generic, as is usually the case with Tolkien-esque fantasy, what really won me over were the characters and the ability to roleplay through the dialogue system. I really can't understate how powerful it was for me. Having to strategically maneuver through the dialogue trees to keep everyone happy was as exciting a conflict for me as the actual combat was, which is yet another understated element of this title. I could keep going on about this game for hours, and at some point I likely will. But for now, I'll leave you with this. If you enjoy Western RPGs, you need to try Dragon Age Origins. Not 2, not Inquisition, Origins. This brings us to number 5. Well, I knew this would have to come up at some time. So this is where things are going to get a bit darker as well as controversial. So for those of you that have sour opinions regarding this particular topic, please keep it to yourself. I don't want my comment section turning into a war zone because of the people involved in creating this particular game. In fact, I may even delete said comments, as this is supposed to be a list about positivity. There's a time and a place for everything, but I won't have that sort of negativity on this particular topic. That being said, entry number 5 is Depression Quest. I've brought up a few times how I suffer from anxiety and depression. What I haven't mentioned is that this is something that I wasn't truly aware of until just a couple of years ago. I've always had, let's say mood issues that through most of my adolescence were chalked up to being hormones, but that moodiness never went away. Coming from a family that is full to the brim with mental illness, along with life events causing my symptoms to become even more aggravated, meant I finally talked to a doctor, and, well, that's that. But during this pivotal time in my life, while I was struggling not so much with coming to terms with my issue, but how I could explain it to others, I found Depression Quest. This choose-your-own-adventure web browser game was exactly what I needed to play. It was a reassurance that someone else understood what it was like, and it was expressed in a way that I was unable to express for myself. Because of this, I sent this game to a few of my friends to play as well, so they could get a small taste of what I was going through. While some people criticize it for not going deep enough into what depression is, I feel it's right where it needed to be, showing a taste of how even on the good days it affects every moment of your life, while not being so dark that it may have triggered something awful in those who are already afflicted. I was most stricken by the simple but effective means that the game used to get its point across, by not allowing you to choose options that were clearly there to reinforce how crippling depression can actually be. It was a simple but elegant means of showing how people who suffer from this illness clearly can see what they should do, but often just can't bring themselves to, no matter how much they struggle with it. Anyway, I'm not trying to say that this is how everyone deals with or experiences depression, but it does open a window for others to take a glance inside, and I feel it was a commendable and successful effort. Let's move back to the more positive side of things. I know this is going to sound like an obvious statement and one applicable to most people, but I love music. Pop, rock, classical, a cappella, jazz, hell, you name a genre, there's probably some music in it that I enjoy. In fact, just to prove both my geekiness and love for music, I will admit that I participated in musical theater for 10 years and choir for 3. And yet, for some reason, I never picked up an instrument. Enter Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero 3 to be specific. I have to admit, when I first saw this game, I thought it looked gimmicky and kinda stupid. All of my friends were playing it and I waved them off, dismissing them as filthy casuals because they were playing with plastic guitars, while I fought to bring down Yasmat. It wasn't until around the time that Guitar Hero 3 came out that a friend actually forced me to play the game, and oh how wrong I'd been. Even when I was a noob and playing on easy mode, Guitar Hero made me feel like a rock god, introducing me to rhythm games as a whole, well, excluding Parappa the Rapper, while also introducing me to many a band that my poor pathetic self had never heard of. In short, I became obsessed. I borrowed the game from my friend and played it for a week straight, working my way up the difficulty chains and unlocking new songs. I then went back to Guitar Heroes 1 and 2 as well, and well, there went a month of my summer. The really miraculous thing about this game is that at some point, it was no longer enough for me, and this is the real reason this game is on this list. Guitar Hero, among other influences, such as my highly musical friends, finally convinced me to pick up a real guitar for myself, and I've been playing ever since. Am I any good? Yeah, that's not so important. But what is important is that a fairly simple video game led me to a whole other passion that acts not only as a hobby to me, but a form of therapy, and I cannot think of a better turn of events than that. Alright, we're getting down to the bottom of this list. Let's get to the top 3, starting with number 3. Good old Legend of Legaia, an RPG for the original PlayStation that's main gimmick is its unique combat system that has you inputting directional commands to make combos and chains of special attacks. While not a particularly brilliant RPG, it's certainly one I have nostalgic memories for, but even that isn't why it's on the list. Legend of Legaia holds a special place in my heart because it's the most important game in what can only loosely be called my critiquing career. Now before I go on, this is a topic that up to this point I've refused to talk about, and for good reason. What I say will likely be vague because I don't want to bring up any drama or insult any other people whom are trying to work their way up in this industry. With that being said, there's no point denying who I am or where I've come from, so here we go. I'd been writing amateurish fan reviews on GameSpot for a long time, but never really took things seriously until I saw a Help Wanted ad for a little-known website called Operation Rainfall. Some of you may recognize the name. It's most well known for their campaigning to get the 3 Wii RPGs, The Last Story, Xenoblade Chronicles, and Pandora's Tower, brought to America. Long story short, I sent in some example work and was accepted as a volunteer, which at the time wasn't the most exciting moments of my life. After some training and writing an example article, I was given the opportunity to pick a game to review as my debut, which I chose to be Legend of Legaia as I'd been playing it at the time. As far as I know, that still remains my most popular review on their site, which is funny because I'm mirroring that phenomenon again with Bahamut Lagoon being my first and most popular video on my channel. I went on to write about a dozen reviews before a shift in management and focus, along with some personal life issues, led me to stepping away from the site. And I feel now more than ever that this decision was for the best, but I silently thank them every time I work on a video, as my time there was a huge confidence boost for me. That being said, I won't talk about the game itself a great deal because I've already reviewed it. If you'd like to read it, there will be a link in the description. In summation, if it weren't for Legend of Legaia and the admittedly small but eye-opening success I found with said review, I definitely would not be making this video today. Number 2. Hey, I never said they were all going to be video games now, did I? I'd been a huge fan of role-playing for a very long time. No, not that, you perverts. A large portion of my preteen and teenage years was spent on a little-known site called GaiaOnline.com. And I mean back in the good old days when it was nothing but some forums, the avatar started in peasant rags, and the most expensive item for your avatar was a single stupid-looking dagger that cost about 20,000 gold. Not this bloated marketplace as it is now. Anyway, Gaia Online was, at least at the time, a site that was intended to be about freeform role-playing. For those that don't know, freeform role-playing basically comes down to 2 or more people writing a story back and forth from their own characters' perspectives. I used to love this. In fact, I enjoyed it so much when I was younger that I spent my entire high school career wanting to become a fiction author. After about 7 years of constant freeform role-playing, however, I started to grow weary of it because there weren't any stakes. Yeah, you could try and write characters with flaws, but ultimately you knew everything was going to work out in the end, which really ruined the appeal for me. If only I could somehow combine the appeal of role-playing with a sort of randomness and high stakes that could make it thrilling. And that, my friends, is when I discovered tabletop role-playing. My first experience was with Pathfinder, a game that is essentially a variation of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5e. Ever since my first session, I've been addicted to this form of gaming. Nothing shows you how limited by technology and coding video games are like a session of a tabletop role-playing game, where your options are almost limitless. I've spent countless hours over the past few years playing. In fact, I still play in near-weekly sessions at my house. There really just isn't anything like the experience of starting from scratch and creating an interactive world with friends, with characters that are fully fleshed out, that have to make decisions that have real and permanent consequences. If you're curious about tabletop role-playing, I've posted a live session of Dungeons & Dragons 5e on this very channel that you can check out to see how it works. And I highly recommend that you do. It's an experience unmatched by anything else. So yeah, thank you, Gabe, for introducing me to Pathfinder. My life hasn't been the same since. Finally, we're on to number 1. Considering the content that is on my channel, many people likely won't be surprised at all to know that the number 1 game on my list is a Final Fantasy title. But what will likely surprise a lot of you is the entry I chose. Well, I played every Final Fantasy game I could get my hands on when I was growing up, and there are undoubtedly better entries in the series than this one. I had to pick Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. This game is my childhood, and it began before the game was even released. I remember spending countless hours logging onto Squaresoft's website, waiting for 20 minutes for the trailer to load back when all my parents had was a crappy dial-up modem, just so I could watch the trailer over and over again. I ended up getting the game for Christmas the year it came out. To this day, it is my most fondly remembered present of all time. It was my very first tactics game. Well, if you don't count my 5-year-old self messing around with the original XCOM and having no idea what I was doing. And I've loved the strategy genre ever since. It was the first Final Fantasy game that I actually owned instead of having to borrow them from my father or friends. Hell, the game even taught me an important life lesson when I used a Game Shark to max out my character, only to realize that having all those bonuses without having worked for them took all of the pride and meaning out of said accomplishment. I could spend hours telling stories about this title. How I used to stay up at night and played under the covers of the flashlight until I overheated and had to force myself to stop. How I used to take the game to school so that I could get just a taste of the multiplayer functions out of the game with the few people I met who also owned it. I never had Pokemon games growing up, so this was a new and exciting thing for me. Another time, I'm remembering now, I got grounded for sneaking the game along on a camping trip. My parents caught me playing it when I was specifically told not to bring it along in the first place, and, well, I got caught. These are little more than small, silly stories, but they're all stories that have stuck with me throughout the years, and to my delight, on top of all of those nostalgic memories, the game is still fun to play today. The gameplay mechanics are well thought out and interesting, the presentation is vibrant and cute. The story, while aimed at a younger crowd, is still solid enough to be worthwhile, especially when you take into account that you are arguably playing the game's villain. Yeah, you heard me right, Marsh is the villain of the story, but I'll go into more detail on that when I finally get around to reviewing it. It is just outstanding, and the fact that it's so often overshadowed by its big brother, the original Final Fantasy Tactics, is just a shame, as this game deserves more love and attention. Will it ever mean the same thing to you that it does to me? Probably not, but it's still worth checking out. Well, there you have it, a video that turned out to be much longer than I had originally anticipated, and perhaps a bit sappier than I had expected as well. Speaking of thanks, while I'm certainly thankful for these games, there are quite a few people I need to show appreciation for while I have you here. A huge thank you in no particular order to Jeremy, Gabe, Ryan, Chris, Sarah, Angel, Lawson, and Billy for being so supportive of me over the past few years, pushing me to pursue the project that I've always wanted to work on. I'd also like to thank Cody James Dole and Matthew Mini-Matt Elston. Though I haven't known them long, they've both lent a hand in a more tangible way by helping with the videos and publicizing my content. A special thanks to Andrew Vigil and his wife Stephanie Vigil for both being supportive of me and also helping me out more times than I could possibly count with my real life issues. Also, a very public congratulations to the two of you on your newly started family. I'm proud of you both, and I know you'll be great parents. And of course, how can I make a thank you list like this without mentioning my favorite Australian, the amazingly talented Charlotte Buckingham. She has acted as my editor for written content for a couple of years now, and on top of that has been an amazingly helpful friend. So thank you very, very much. I'm also, of course, very thankful for those of you who have been watching, who are subscribed, and who have been sharing my content. Thank you all so much. You help to keep me going. Anyway, what about you all? What games are you thankful for? What games have had a large impact on your life, or just brilliant gaming experiences that you're happy you've got to have? Please share them in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear what you all have to say.